Most of my family is 99% certain that my cousin murdered his best friend when they were about 12. He's always been a very strange kid, prone to fits of violence. He once tried to beat my other cousin with a canoe for splashing him, and his dad has done time for child molestation. The two of them were alone by a river. My cousin came back and very calmly told his parents that his friend had drowned. The kid had evidence of blunt force trauma to the head, but my cousin said that he had slipped and fell. The DA and medical experts attested that it was not a wound that would have been caused merely by a slip and fall. But my cousin had a great lawyer and got off. I don't hang around that side of the family anymore, for several reasons. My husband's grandpa and grandma killed his grandpa's mom this year. It was the late 1940s, and the three of them were planning to travel to another city for reasons unknown. The mom refused to chip in for gas, so they wouldn't let her ride in the cab of the truck. She rode in the box of the truck in -30 winter weather, and when they stopped for a break, she had froze to death. They hid the body in the random town they had stopped at for a break, and continued on their trip. They picked her body up on the way back to the pharmacy. To this day, Grandma insists her mother-in-law should have helped pay for gas. Edit. I thought this story would get buried. I asked my husband some details to answer a few questions on this. 1. They were going to a livestock market and she was in the box of the truck with some sheep. 30C by the way. 2. At that time, on the farm, if someone died you just called the town doctor and they came and wrote a death certificate. No reporting went to police, and it wasn't considered suspicious. 3. She's buried in the family cemetery. Also, we realize this is totally fucked up. We only found out recently because we don't have much contact with that side of the family. My uncle raped and murdered his disabled daughter and tried to frame someone else so he could collect insurance money. He got away with it for almost 20 years. One day, I get a phone call from my dad saying that we should expect the family name in the news and why. Edit. My uncle was not my child and as such this was off topic. She was mid-teens and developmentally disabled. He tried to frame a supposed hitchhiker serial killer in the 80s. Tried to follow the same patterns. He was caught via a cold case study. Early tests had some of his DNA on her, but protection was used during the rape and he had a passable alibi at the time. When some of the DNA was retested, they found more clues linking my uncle to the murder, and after checking with said alibi, the person who gave it confessed that they lied. The moment the police came for my uncle, he cried and thanked them for catching him. He admitted the whole thing right away and said that he couldn't handle her anymore. Took out the life insurance policy, and did as he did. He is in jail for life and getting at least part of what he deserves there. He has been disowned by literally every member of the family, and 2 of his nephews have changed at least part of their name that was from his. Not me, but my mother was in a relationship with a serial killer, pedophile. In the early to mid-80s my mom started dating this guy. She already had my older sister with another man. New boyfriend was a doting stepdad. They lived in Las Vegas. My mom ran Keno and he was a card counter. She'd help disguise him because he was blacklisted from most casinos for the aforementioned card counting. I came along. They continued to be the happy little super dysfunctional family until the FBI grabs my mom from work and interrogates her for hours about him. He's a rapist, pedophile, murder. My mom didn't know. She dabbled in low-level criminality but not that stuff. Splits town with us kids. Gets back with older sister's dad. I grow up not knowing this until I'm 14 and my parents divorce and dad asks for a DNA test for me. And I'm floored. Your dad isn't your dad, it's actually this evil man who's on death row. My mom's a huge drunk and drug addict. She can't even speak to me about this without a full-fledged mental breakdown. So everything I know is spotty. She passed away 4 years ago. I'm going throughout her stuff and find some letters from the History Channel contacting her to participate in a documentary about him. Monsieur, one thing that chills me to my core. He used to call her his first victim's name during sex. She swore she never knew until after the fact, and I believe her. Her ex-fiancé of 7 years together. He started doing meth without me knowing 5 years and 2 kids in. Tried to get him help when I found out. Left him because he refused it. They caught him in his victim's car. He confessed 12 days into his trial. Got life plus 10. Said he wanted to know how it felt to kill someone. I'm raising our 2 kids. They don't know yet. Don't plan on telling them until they're old enough. Kills me that they will have to live with a burden like that. It's massively unfair. They certainly don't deserve it. And neither did the victim or his family. Off the meth, he was the type of person that would help the homeless. Generous, outgoing, excessively intelligent and ambitious. How heavy drugs can change people into monsters. My adopted sister got into a car wreck this weekend while off her medication this weekend. She takes it so that her epilepsy is well managed. We don't know why she didn't take the meds, but she seized a grand mal and struck a mother and her 2 kids on a sidewalk or crosswalk. The 2 kids were crushed to death, and the mother is still in the ICU. My sister is also in the hospital, and we don't know if she will go to prison for the accident. Deleted. When I was 10 or 11, my younger brother and I were visiting our grandparents, hanging out in the hotel. We were told that our mother had passed and our dad was going to jail. It took a while to realize what happened. I got the full story when I was 15. Dad was sleeping. Mom tried to suffocate him with a pillow. He ended up switching it around onto her, resulting in her death. According to newspaper articles, he hid her body in the woods, and according to the police, they would not have found the body unless my dad told the monsieur. He was sentenced to like 15 years in prison. He got out of prison 5 years ago or so. Gets caught up in the pharmaceutical drugs, which led to harder things, and ends up getting some heroin with fentanyl laced in it. And nods. I turned out okay. I have a hard time expressing feelings in my relationship, but my fiancé loves me and works with me. Obligatory, not my kid, but my stepdad's kid, which we will call Jay. He went on a murder spree. He wanted to kill all his family members. He successfully killed both his maternal and fraternal grandfathers. He got caught midway through the murder spree cause he left his great aunt alive and tied up. She got free after he left and called the police, and his mom, who was next on the list, Jay stole his great aunt's phone so he could pretend to be her and meet up with his monsieur. He ended up meeting the police instead. He had tried going to other relatives' homes, but it was in the middle of the workday and people weren't home. Otherwise he would have killed more before getting caught. He got 100 years with 0 chances of parole. The judge said the sentence was symbolic because by the time it's over, there won't be anyone left alive to remember his heinous acts. Edit. I forgot to mention how it's impacted my stepdad. He turned into an alcoholic for years afterwards. He did everything he could to help his son be a good person and feels like he failed. He blames himself. His son Jay is criminally insane and had shown that countless times over the course of his life. Shit, Jay tried to burn down his school when he was in kindergarten. He had already gone to jail for attempted murder up in Alaska too. Only in the last year or two really has my stepdad gotten any better. He's finally getting close again with his daughter, and the drinking has slowed some, in part due to my monsieur. I just wish he would go to therapy and get proper help. It's unlike him to seek that kind of treatment though, 'cause he is a very private person and that goes against his nature. Edit 2. Meant paternal not fraternal. Oops. My brother killed his girlfriend shortly after their son was born. He still won't tell us why he did it, but he did confess and has never once denied doing it. He's in prison until 2046 last I checked. We always knew growing up that he'd end up in legal trouble eventually, but not as early, and it did. My great-aunt was dating this guy, and this guy really wanted to have sex with her. It was 1930s Italy, in a remote town. Sex before marriage, even to a fiancé, basically made you an instant town slut. Anyway, he promised to marry her if they did, and she said yes. Well, a few days later, she sees him flirting with another woman. So she goes home, grabs her father's gun, and kills him in the streets after luring him in. She only got a few years in prison and moved to Toronto a year later. Happily married with 5 kids. My stepson killed one of his bullies in high school. He has a cleft palate, and it's a pretty bad one. All his life he's been bullied for it. His mother and I have done everything we could to stop the bullying, but it never ceased. We contacted administrators, moved, switched schools, tried everything. Eventually, we decided on an online homeschooling program. Unfortunately, one of his bullies from his last school knew where we lived. He'd come by and taunt my stepson regularly. My wife and I were never around because the kid would come while we were working. One day, after my son tried ignoring his previous taunting, the bully figured it must have been a good idea to break in and find him. He threw a brick through our back window, which was in the guest bedroom, and proceeded to attempt to enter. Now, I partially blame myself for what happened next. My son never knew his real father, and so since I've come in, I've done everything in my power to fill in, and we grew pretty close. I ended up trusting him enough to tell him where I kept my gun. Seeing as how his mother and I worked so often, I wanted him to be able to protect himself if anything were to happen if we were gone. So, he grabs my gun, opens the door to where the bully was, and shot him in the chest twice. He died before the ambulance reached the scene. My son was never charged for anything, as there was obvious evidence of a forced entry, and the neighbors claimed that the bully repeatedly said he was gonna kill my son when he got inside. This happened almost 10 years ago when my son was 15. He's been to so many different psychologists and therapists since then. Something in him changed that day. Like he blamed himself. For years he tried to isolate himself from the world. He became a heavy alcoholic, and even attempted suicide. He blames himself for taking another human's life even though he knows his was in danger. Seeing what happened to my boy, it's heartbreaking. I sold the gun, never got another one. To this day, he still has that look of grief and guilt in his eyes. I'm starting to believe no amount of tears will ever wash it away. Edit. Thank you all so much for the support and condolences. It's such a hard thing for me to tell this story, and so many people speaking up for my family brings tears to my eyes. I can't put into words how much this really means to me. Thank you. All of you. I work at a restaurant, and the father of a killer is one of our regulars. It's a fancy restaurant. Dude is super rich. He and his wife live separate lives, and he goes through a lot of girlfriends, always 20+ years younger than him. He pays for their condos and plastic surgery. He got one of them a gold necklace that read "Gold Digger" and had her wear it in public. Not a lot of respect for women. That guy. Loud, smarmy older businessman type. Anyway, his son is the guy who killed his girlfriend in LA and drained all her blood. I don't know how the dad feels about it inside, but outwardly, no change. Zero change in lifestyle or persona, mannerisms. I'm just an outsider obviously, but you wouldn't even know it happened. When it happened. Not a parent, but I was briefly neighbors with a family who had a son that ended up killing them because he got addicted to heroin, and the parents wouldn't give him any money for his habit.